like instead of judging someone, if we lead with curiosity
and compassion,
you
have to hold
then
compassion.
anyone that has a different opinion to us or anyone that does something different to us or something that we don't agree with, we can learn from them. And if they are doing something like better than us, we can use them as a lighthouse. We can see them. We can go, oh, there's another way of doing things that I didn't realize.
Welcome back to No Place Like Home. I am Larissa, and we're here with Jess. I'll get the intro right one day, won't I? Today we are going to talk about the sister wound. What is it?
It's huge.
Right. Talk to me.
So I think if you're a woman, you have experienced the sister wound in some way. Usually it starts in childhood and it can be described as a splitting from the sisterhood. So I want to be clear, it's not a physical wound, it's an emotional wound that we carry. And
is it called the sister wound? Like, I'm just being very literal here.
Yeah.
Is it called the sister wound because it's a connection with your literal relative sister, or it's sister wound as in the sisterhood?
The sisterhood.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yep.
But it can start with your own sisters, birth sisters, if you have them. But it's generally, it for most people, it begins in childhood, and it's described as a splitting from the sisterhood because it's when you're first either bullied or felt alienated by your sisters. And it breeds this feeling. I mean, look, you can go back further to the witch hunts and women having to turn against each other in order to save themselves. And before we had the same rights that we have now, women having to fight against each other for mates. So it goes back quite far. And it's just this competitiveness and this jealousy and this betrayal that comes up for women. And I mean, find me a person that hasn't experienced this.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And
I
then
can already think of many times.
it's self-perpetuating because wounded people wound other people, hurt people hurt people. It's a thing. So when we're hurt or when we feel that betrayal, we then go and do that to other people, whether consciously or subconsciously. And I find it comes up a lot in motherhood. I mean, whether it's...
Well, because we're kind of all pitting each other against each other.
Yeah.
Not consciously, I don't think, but I think because of the stigma around birth, pregnancy, and then that postpartum period of how do we look, how are we mothering, what do we look like mothering, that unintentionally, I think what you're talking about sort of comes out in what we do day to day without, like I said, without consciously going, oh, well, how is she doing it? I need to do it better or whatever it is. I think we unconsciously might change things that we do. Yeah. I don't know if competition's the right word.
Competition is a huge one. And it's, I think we spoke about it in a past episode where you need other people to do the same thing as you do to validate your choices. And that's a subconscious thing. So when people don't do what we do, we either see them as wrong or we see them as competition. And, we need to be better. We need to be like them, whether it's the pram, whether it's the weight loss, whether it's the perfect husband, whether it's the whatever it is. There's, I mean, have you... I'm sure I've personally never heard you say a bad word about another woman, but have you?
Took me a long time to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's many instances where, I personally have been in those situations. Probably the first things that come to mind are more in my previous career, and that was, I sort of felt probably more that pressure to be in my masculine like the whole time because I was in a very, I suppose, masculine dominated industry.
This is, sorry, I just want to interrupt you because this
yeah.
is a huge thing as well, where women, we're taught not to take up space and not to be successful. And then if we are successful, we only know how to do it in a masculine way. So it's really interesting to hear you say this.
So it's interesting because I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but my 10-year-old daughter is. And so I have to sit in the car and listen to Taylor Swift songs. But the way that I manage that is I actually try and actually listen to the lyrics. And she's actually written a song called, I think it's If I Were a Man. And the lyrics in that song depict exactly sort of that whole thing, what we're talking about. But to go back to the, that sisterhood kind of connection is that even in that, sitting in my masculine the whole time and needing to be, at the head of the board table and, showing I can do all of the things. And I did it successfully, but it was also very exhausting. I was also unconsciously like just wiping out all of my female colleagues because I was like, I need to dominate. So,
and there's that the concept of we rise by lifting others is so important, but it's so lost. And it shows up so much professionally when people feel like they need to compete rather than rise together.
Yeah, and that was a huge and I am a huge believer in we have to go through these things in order to, on the other side, realise all of our mistakes and regrets and, I probably should have done that a bit better. And so I never regret anything that I do, and if I've hurt people along the way, I have gone back and, right my wrongs. But, yeah, if I didn't go through that, I suppose then I wouldn't be in this situation of surrounding myself with a whole lot of women to literally give birth to this business home. So, yeah, it comes full circle, but I think we unfortunately have to go through that sometimes in order to come back around and actually embrace our sisterhood as well.
Yeah.
What about you, Jess? Have you?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot while we've been planning this episode, and I really pride myself in having created a community within the doula world where there is absolutely zero competition. We are so united. We all support each other. We're constantly referring each other. We all have this knowing that who someone chooses as a doula is so deeply personal. It's not about us. It's about the client and whether or not they feel the connection with us. But that's in the doula world. It's very special.
Very special.
There's definitely other. So one big thing that can happen with women or girls when they feel that splitting from the sisterhood is they just kind of give up on women and only make friends with boys or men. And that was me for a long time. My closest friends were all males.
Oh.
Yeah. And I still liked women and I still got along with women, but my closest friends were males. They just felt easier, less complicated.
Did they feel safer?
Yeah. And then I guess, I still have those intrusive thoughts sometimes, the competitive thoughts. Like, for example, when I had Mama Goodness and another meal delivery service launched in Melbourne, I was like, this is our turf. And then very quickly I was like, no. There is room for everyone. The more people who are doing this, the better.
Yep.
And I went from, that instant, it's like the instant thought of competitiveness, and then my it's like the ego reaction, and then my higher self knows what I actually want to believe and practice. And so then I was sharing their social media on the Mama Goodness social media and, and just making sure that I was being really supportive because it's so important. And my psychologist said to me once upon a time, it's lonely at the top. Because I was talking about how a good friend of mine completely ghosted me after I wrote my first cookbook. And she was like, people are willing to be around when you're sort of coasting with them, but once you become successful, a lot of people can't handle your success and they don't know how to process that, so they ditch you. And it was really enlightening because I'd heard the term, it's lonely at the top, but I'd never felt that. And then I guess still for me professionally, there's still – so another big way the sister wound shows up is tearing women down because we want to feel better about ourselves. And so what I notice myself doing, there's two people in particular in the food world who are more successful than me. And I find myself picking holes in their work. And I don't say it to other people. It's just like in my own
your
mind.
own internal dialogue.
And then I catch myself doing it and I realize that I'm doing that because I'm trying to make myself feel better. And it's really toxic, but I think awareness is so important, you know.
Awareness is the biggest thing.
Yeah. And
because that's what stops us. That's what, like you just said, that's what catches us in those moments of like, I don't want to be this person. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And then it's been interesting with Life After Birth coming up because, you know, it's not a cookbook. It's it's definitely not a cookbook. And just seeing how different people have received that book has been really interesting to me. We've been so celebrated, Vaughan and I, by a lot of people, but there's also some people who, you know, you send them a copy of the book. They've got podcasts or books or platforms dedicated to supporting women and they can't even give us a little social media share. And on one hand, I'm like, oh, maybe it's because they're so busy and they're so wrapped up and they just forgot. But I think there's also a little bit of something else there that prevents that, again, that we rise by lifting others.
Yeah.
Some people don't have that in them yet and it's really painful.
Yeah. So why does this happen? Like, why do you think we do this? What's the story?
Well, yeah, a lot of, as we sort of spoke about earlier, a lot of, you know, when you read about the sister wound, a lot of people link it back to the burning of the witches or just the witch hunts in general, which because a lot of, it was kind of like kill or be killed.
I've done many past life regressions and I've been a witch. That I have.
And so and it's innate in us, you know, and then like what we spoke about earlier, that competition over mates and just, you know, women had to be the best so that they could have the best life because they couldn't work. They couldn't own land. So it was all based on who they ended up with as a partner.
The patriarchy.
The patriarchy. I mean, the patriarchy has a lot to answer for. And also, you know, I think the patriarchy, it keeps it, you know, women just go through so much and we're kept so small. And so we're just in this little bubble of competitiveness and cattiness and fighting. And when we're doing that, we're not focused on the patriarchy. So it's self-perpetuating in a way that benefits the patriarchy.
This is another one of those things that, you know, we should talk about. And why is this not commonly understood and talked about?
Yeah. I just thought of another way that the sister wound shows up for me that I think is a really important one to share. And it's that coming back to that it's lonely at the top thing. And I've often felt, and I know a lot of mums relate to this, which is why I'm sharing it. I had a really amazing birth and really amazing postpartum experience, and I have a really, really like outrageously fucking amazing husband. And sometimes I feel like I'm not allowed to talk about that. I'm not allowed to shine because it makes other people feel shit.
Yeah.
And so a lot of women dim their light because they don't want to, you know, even like on Instagram I used to share about all my workouts that I was doing and then you just get one snide comment from someone and it really makes you, you know,
retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And other people would say, no, it's inspirational. I want those posts so that it reminds me to go to the gym. But I'm just like feeling so shit about potentially making someone else feel shit that I dim my light. I don't share all the things. You know, in my postpartum with Jude, I was cooking and one of my other friends who had had a baby close to the time said something snide to me about how much I was getting done. And I just, you know, it was so unnecessary. And again, you can peel it back and you can see she was obviously just feeling insecure about how little she was getting done by her own measure. You still do it. Just holding a baby is so much. And that's not valued enough in society, which is why we
Yeah.
have this. Yeah.
I know, it's so big, isn't it? Like, I'm sure people listening now are like, oh yeah, I have felt that at this time. And, but coming back to your point on the social media and all the rest of it and the dimming the light, like that takes a long time to actually really connect back in and go, no, I'm not going to dim my light anymore. And I found I used to do it more so with family. I used to do it a lot with my family. I didn't seem to have an issue in my career. I think because the whole basis of it was, putting myself out there. But then re-engineering that backwards, I've just really come to this place that as long as I'm feeling good about it and I'm being kind with whatever I'm doing, then I actually can't change how that triggers someone else because we're
No.
all a mirror of each
Oh,
other.
absolutely.
Right? So
yeah.
we're not going to please everyone, and
Yeah.
everyone's not going to be in this state of you're fantastic, because the kindest things that I could do are going to trigger someone else
Yeah.
for whatever their insecurities and their reasons are.
Yeah.
So I think, that's another big thing that we kind of move through
Yeah.
in the sisterhood, to all embrace each other and have that awareness, because
Yeah.
awareness is the biggest thing.
It's so important. And yeah, I'm just thinking more about this, and a lot of women bond over bitching. It's like I think even Jerry, it's a Seinfeld thing as well. It's like, I love you because we hate the same things.
Yeah.
And it's that whole if we're bitching about that person, then we're feeling close to each other. And it's really, really toxic to be bonded over bitching. But it's so prevalent and it's so normalized that often we don't even realize how problematic it is.
No, because I think once you're in the wheel of it, it's very easy to get caught back up in it. I find myself now, though, very aware, and I will very quickly, with a group of girlfriends or even just my mum or whatever.
Even when you're talking to me,
very quickly,
you never ever say anything
I
bad.
will be just like, I'm sure they've got their reasons.
Yeah. And this is the thing, right? Like, if we can start seeing people as, like, instead of judging someone, if we lead with curiosity
and compassion. You have to hold
then
compassion.
anyone that has a different opinion to us, or anyone that does something different to us, or something that we don't agree with, we can learn from them. And if they are doing something like better than us, we can use them as a lighthouse. We can see them. We can go, oh, there's another way of doing things that I didn't realize. And if they're doing something that we don't necessarily agree with, then we need to remember that every single person has a story. Every single person that we meet is wounded in some way. And if we knew their story, we would feel compassion for them. So instead of jumping to that judgment, we need to open our minds and be curious and have compassion. And then I just think
everything flows easier.
so much. It feels
really does.
better.
It does feel
Bitching
so
doesn't
much
feel
better.
good. It feels yucky.
No, your body contracts. Like if you actually are in that moment, and this is how I sort of changed the way that I approached life in general, really. I would really tune into how my body felt when I was speaking a certain way, and it was so contracted. But then when I was like, I'm sure they've all got their reasons, I'm not going to take it personally or whatever it might be, that I felt a lot more open and expansive, So I suppose if we go back to the sisterhood wound, and then we talk about, how is this affecting new mums?
Yeah, I mean, gosh.
Mums in general, how can we help?
So I mean, we've kind of touched on how it's affecting mums. I think, whether it's that judgment, it's like, oh, you're sleep training. Oh, you're not sleep training. Oh, you're doing this. Oh, you're not doing that. Oh, you got that pram. Oh, you're wearing that. That's just got to go.
Do you feel like mothers groups can perpetuate?
No, I actually think mothers groups are wonderful because one of the best ways to heal as women is to sit in circle. They say when women gather, it heals the earth. So
in an intentional way.
And then this is the thing.
Yeah,
so it's like,
in an intentional way.
I think people coming in, mothers group can be problematic because no one's willing to be honest and we're all coming in with these sister wounds. But if we can break that down and come into our mothers group with honesty and openness and compassion, and, maybe it starts with the maternal and child health nurses, the people who are facilitating these mothers groups actually, because they're often carrying a sister wound themselves, and so these mums feel judged by their maternal and child health nurse. But if we can use mothers groups as a way to unite with other women, and they don't need to be our best friends. We don't need to make friends with every single woman that we encounter. Not everyone is going to be for us, but it doesn't have to be black and white. It's that black and white mentality that is so problematic.
It's so hard to change that mindset though and not compare yourself to others.
I mean, that whole saying, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes, I love that.
I compare myself to others constantly,
even
though I'm aware that how problematic it is.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard not to, because look at the media that we consume.
Please don't start me on the media.
Look at The Bachelorette. All these women competing for a guy, or is that The Bachelor? I've actually never watched any of them. The Bachelor, if it's the women competing for the guy, The Bachelor. All these shows where it's like, even like, the way commercials are, it's always like women against women. So of course it's going to be hard for us to overcome that when it's just every facet of our lives is ingrained
with this programming of how we should, could.
Yeah.
It's all of that, isn't it? No wonder we're so scared to show our vulnerability.
Oh yeah.
Because again, I can't believe I'm quoting Taylor Swift, right? I just cannot get over this. Anyway, nothing against Tay-Tay, but just not my cup of tea. But we come back to that, if we show, she actually says in the song, if we show our vulnerability, and then we're weak and we can't do the job and, we can't do all of these things. And we're kind of like it skews that perception of us if we are in positions of power or, and there are some great examples of women in power that have shown their vulnerability and still been successful. And
there's so much power and vulnerability.
Oh my goodness, yes.
In a man's world, not so much.
I feel like, I don't know, I think it's a function of your environment as well, but I certainly feel like the men around me, and, this is also something that we, when one person is kind of changing the energetics, then it permeates out to everyone in that environment. But I feel like there is a shift in men particularly that is changing to be a lot more accepting of vulnerability. You've got amazing men's circles now, breathwork facilitations for men's groups, the what was it? The where the old men used to gather in a shed, like a men's shed, right? And they old retirees used to gather for something to do and, tinker and whatever. It's that version, I think, is evolving now, and I think men are starting to feel more comfortable with showing their vulnerability, which benefits the sisterhood as well, right?
Yeah.
Because there's an acceptance that's starting to brew in the surface, and that permeates.
Yeah. So,
We can't control the actions of others,
No.
words.
but we can control how we respond. And yeah, I think for a lot of people, if they're hearing about the sister wound for the first time, it's going to be like a light bulb moment in their minds that makes them reflect on how they go about their daily lives and how they treat other women. And
There's such a beautiful intention for this podcast, actually.
yeah,
That
just bringing awareness to it.
Just have a moment of reflection.
Because if you are someone that bitches about other people, or you feel competitive over other women, or whatever it is, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you are like this, because society has created this. But once you learn about it, it's your job to grow and overcome it and be united with other women.
And you have the power to do that. I
Yeah.
mean, I would like to think of myself as that example of, and don't get me wrong, I didn't walk around like having massive bitch fests or, anything like that. But just I found the joy in celebrating other women's wins.
Oh, yeah, it's the best feeling, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. And imagine if we all celebrated each other's wins. What a world. And, I feel like people roll their eyes when we talk about the patriarchy, but if we stopped fighting each other, we would be able to fight the patriarchy, and we'd be creating more equality for everyone. And I think that that's so important. We need to band together with other women. And again, we don't have to be best friends with everyone, but we need to at least respect them and their choices.
I think coming back to that, the patriarchy, I like to not actually see the patriarchy as something we need to conquer, or I actually think that the patriarchy is again just another social programming mechanism that has happened unconsciously for the men of this world, and it's been going for so long that they know nothing.
I mean, yeah,
else.
people like Andy and John, they're not like, they benefit from the patriarchy, sure, but they're not perpetuating it. They're not, they want equality for us.
Yeah, and I
their
think we
children.
take all the good parts of it, right? We take all the good parts of it as women that are ultimately creators, we take all of that and we create from all of these parts around us, not just the patriarchy, from the sister wounds and from all of these sorts of things, and I think we ultimately will benefit from that if we see us as the creators.
Yeah. I mean, we carry the creative life force within us, whether or not we choose to become mothers. It's there in us. It's so powerful. So we would love to hear from our listeners.
Yeah.
Whether you have heard of the sister wound before, how it shows up for you, what ways you think it shows up in motherhood, and how we can heal from it. We would love to hear, wonderful stories about overcoming the sister wound. You can write to us on Instagram. You can leave comments if you're listening on Spotify. There's an area to leave comments. Don't be shy. Share with us. We would love to hear from you.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.